first knockout, and then Vespa Queen has to try and win out through the favorable prize trading. I'm not attacking with the EX Pokemon.
So let's see here.
He didn't say that. He said when that thing starts.
Yeah, we're just setting up right now.
Yeah. I don't know anything about Pokemon.
So Chris looks to have a pretty alright hand.
I don't see a supporter, but he does have a unknown and a mulligan to work with.
It's my favorite Pokemon.
So let's see here.
Those double sleeves.
Fresh 7 from Nick.
I don't know how deep you were going.
Well, my dad, he double sleeves it, and this deck was in here.
And it looks like
I'm
he's
sleeving
opening
it
with the Volcanion EX.
That is not the ideal starter for Nick in this matchup. One of the keys to the matchup is going to be the prize trade.
Oh my God.
Nick having an EX exposed like that is going to prove to be difficult for his matchup. So let's see how good of a job he does of getting it out of the active for something a little bit better, like Baby Volcanion.
He should have 2 turns to work with, so it shouldn't be a problem. He probably plays 3 or 4 switching cards, maybe Olympia. So he should be able to get out of the active.
The Olympia in his opening hand.
I know.
He does have the Olympia? Okay, so he should be able to get it out of the active fairly reasonably before Chris can take advantage of it being in the starting.
Alright, so our players are waiting for the official word to start. Yeah, so who do you have winning this matchup as well?
Was this really close?
It's pretty close. It comes a lot down to how many baby Volcanions Nick can chain together while pretty much continuously ending Chris so that he can't set up Lysander plays on the bench on the EXs. So if Nick can chain together 3 baby Volcanions and force Chris to knock each and every one out, I think he will be favored. So it's all just going to come down to how he sets up his board to deal with Chris's. Also, if Chris can't get early access to the Vaporeon, he might struggle to take early knockouts, and Nick could definitely run away with this game really fast.
I agree. Do we know what Chris got off the mulligan? I didn't get a chance to see.
Yeah.
I'm not
I don't think he said anything inappropriate.
sure. I think he had the Eevee and Unknown in hand before he drew the mulligans.
He did, yes.
He only drew one mulligan, so he's hoping for a supporter. I know he doesn't have that in his hand right now, at least I don't think so. If he doesn't, he will have the draw on Unknown to try and find something. Nick might also just end turn 1, as sometimes you're fairly often forced to going first.
I haven't been out to New York in so long. I'm just so like.
Another thing that might come into this matchup is the stadiums. So we know Chris plays the one Force Giant Plus, but do we know Nick's stadium count? Scorcher, Skyfield, Perilous City, all common in Volcanion.
Also Faded Town, which is not as effective in the matchup, but would be a decent counter stadium, I guess. Any stadium to counter the Force Giant Plants. I think Chris runs a Forest and a Parallel. So it'll really just come down to what stadiums Nick runs and how effective they're going to be. Because if you run something like the Faded Town, it won't be very effective at all.
And we're off here, so Nick up first, opts to play the Hoopa. Searching through his deck, seeing what options, what's prized, what isn't prized.
Searches for up to 3 Pokemon EX and can put them into your hand. Pretty much the strongest starter for the Volcanion deck. There's not really any other Pokemon you'd rather play turn 1 immediately than a Hoopa. Hoopa's pretty much as good as it gets.
Definitely. So he gets 2 Volcanion EX and a Shaman. Hoping to see a baby Volcanion sometime soon, but I think this is only a good start here for Nick.
Now, I'm not sure if Nick knows that Chris is running the Vaporeon, so I'm not a huge fan of taking the second Volcanion EX, as it will start to clog his bench. Maybe he does run the Skyfield, maybe he even has the Skyfield. But if he does clog his bench and is unable to put baby Volcanions into play, he's going to have to start attacking with the X's, which is what Chris wants.
I assume Chris is playing Zoroark?
No, it's actually just Evolutions and Vespa Queen.
Oh, okay.
He has a Mew EX in there.
Oh,
to help with not running out of attackers. All right, there's the Float Stone, so he's going to be able to get his Volcanion EX out of the active.
Fighting Fury Belt on the EX. I'm sure he would rather have put that on a baby.
For sure. Being able to deny the first couple early knockouts on the baby Volcanions is pretty important in the matchup.
Alright, so we see a baby Volcanion go down on the bench here for Nick. I don't see a... does he have a supporter in his hand? I can't really
I'm not
tell.
sure. It's a good setup, but once like I mentioned, now his bench is clogged, and you don't need to set up big Volcanion EXs in this matchup to draw prizes. You just need a steam up and to attack with the baby Volcanion's first attack to do 100 damage to a Vespiquen. So this might come back to bite him, clogging his bench like this, and where he might struggle to get out other baby Volcanions and will have to be forced to attack with the Volcanion EX.
Lysander?
So we see a pass to Chris here. Chris farewell letters. He benches a Combi, attaches double colorless, and he Lysanders up the Volcanion EX, which is now effectively stuck there because of Nick's inability to put a float stone on it. So we'll see how he chooses to deal with this. We know that he plays Olympia, but for now he just chooses to attach an energy and pass.
And it looks like both of them are drawing pretty poorly here. I'm not sure what Chris's top deck was. I think it's a Hex Maniac. Not great. So it's going to be a lot of draw passing until one of them top decks something. Hopefully it's an end so we can actually get a game between both of them.
Chris thinks about this play. He opts to play the Hex Maniac here. I'm not sure how I feel about that. I mean, I guess it gets it into the discard pile, but I feel like you could have held it.
I mean, I think that's the most important thing here. He knows that he's on himself as well as Nick is on top deck mode. So one of the top decks is N. So you'd rather have the Hex Maniac in the discard pile if Nick top decks an N than not. So I like the play of the Hex Maniac there. There's the Force of Giant Plants. I'm not sure what Chris drew. It doesn't seem to be very good. Via Seeker.
Lysander?
Lysander's up the other Volcanion EX on the bench. This one, maybe not as bad for Nick because it does not have a tool on it, so he could put a float stone down. But we will see what he gets here. Trainer's Mails, that's something that could get him out of this rut. But
taking a long time is probably not great. I would actually also assume that Nick probably only plays 2 float stone. 1 escape rope is really strong in the current format they're playing our deck, and he is running the Olympia, so that's 4 switch cards total. So I doubt he plays the 3rd float stone. It's definitely possible. I think he's maybe choosing. I think I saw an N. I'm not sure though.
okay, so Nick confirms to us that there
Let's
is
make
an
it a
N.
game.
The choices are N and Acrobike. Oh. He's going to take the Acrobike. I don't mind this.
I don't know if I necessarily agree with this play.
Sure.
We'll see how it pans out, but I think I definitely would have taken the N in this situation. So Nick chooses to Ultra Ball for Volcanion, Baby, thinning his deck, hopefully getting something that is not a Pokemon or an energy off of this Acrobike.
Also, not a big fan of taking the Baby Volcanion, especially because what you're really looking for here is a Professor Sycamore, which means you're going to be discarding the Baby Volcanion, which is one of your best trade options in this matchup. And there it goes. He's discarding the Baby Volcanion.
Now, I think Nick just discarded 2 VS Seeker off of that Sycamore, and he also discarded a VS Seeker off of the Acrobike. So Nick is down a lot of resources. Late game, if you want to have access to the supporters, he's going to have to not use them so liberally.
And Volcanion X has 3 retreat costs, correct?
Yes.
All right, so he's not going to be retreating or attacking until next turn. Yep, and there's the pass. See if Chris finally gets anything. There's an unknown. Farewell letter. Looks like a Sycamore? Okay, so it looks like we're going to have a game. Forest comes down.
And now Chris, he has farewell lettered a couple of times, so there are a somewhat decent amount of Pokemon in his discard pile. Not as many as he would like, but with the Vaporeon coming down, I definitely think this Vespiquen will be ready. Maybe not this turn, but next turn to do good damage to this Volcanion.
Yeah, depending on how well he draws here, there's potential to take the knockout. The Vespiquen deck can run through itself pretty fast. His hand doesn't look great. I don't see an Ultra Ball. I do see a Shaman, but if he's not thinning with the Ultra Ball, he's not going to be drawing that many cards. So it's probably just going to be a pass. There it is. Back to Nick. Nick will finally be able to attack this turn. But it is with the Volcanion EX, which we talked about before. If it gets stranded in the active and he's forced to attack with it, it definitely favors Chris, because Chris doesn't want to have to try and Lysander all the EXs. He wants them to come to the active for him so he can just cleanly knock them out.
Sure. So we see a Lysander here bringing up the Vespiquen. This is a good play on Nick's part, but with the Force of Giant Plants in play, Chris, I don't think he'll have much trouble setting up another
Yeah,
Vespiquen.
there's a Revitalizer.
Yeah, here we go. I think he has another Vespiquen already in the discard pile, so he's going to have to be careful of how many Vespiquens he actually has. But
There's a special charge. I think that's the second special charge, actually. So he's limited to 4 DCE from this point on. I'm pretty sure he discarded one off his initial Sycamore. It's not a huge deal. He can just try and go for the 3 knockouts on 3 EX Pokemon.
I guess it all depends on what he can draw of this Shaman, if he does choose to play it.
I would like to see him use the Shaman here. I think he needs to draw as much as possible. I would definitely...
Oh, well, he opts not to.
Not
I think
to.
maybe he wants to do more damage with the Bee Revenge to hopefully take a knockout this turn. He hits DCE.
There is Ultra Ball and Shaman in there, so he can go deeper.
Does he? Okay. I definitely think you go and you get a Vaporeon here. Definitely something that I would look to set up fairly early on in this matchup, because it can often be the deciding factor between you taking a knockout and not.
Yeah, as long as it's not prized, I'm sure he's getting Vaporeon here. He has DCE Shaman in his hand. I'm sure he'll attach DCE set up to try and dig for a Float Stone. And I think he probably has enough Pokemon in the discard pile right now to knock out the Volcanion EX. Not quite sure. He only needs 7 once the Vaporeon does come in play.
I definitely think he has enough in there to take a knockout this turn.
So he's just looking for the Float Stone at this point. He has the DCE. He has the Shaman to draw more cards. And it'll be a big swing. He also needs another Combi. If he doesn't get another Combi and his Stadium gets countered, he only does play the 1 Force, the Giant Plants. So it'll be rough to reset up from there.
So we see the setup here. He gets a Combi.
That's a start.
I'm not sure if he got the Float Stone.
There's another Shaman, so if he wants to dig for more cards, he can. Another Vespiquen out. I think he's going probably to count Pokemon, see if he can get the knockout. Still doesn't have the Float Stone on the active yet, or any other way to retreat.
I'm not sure how much I would like another Shaman here. I think that it might be a little excessive, but taking this knockout definitely is something he needs to do this turn. So he sets up for 3, gets a Float Stone.
Did he get it?
Oh no, maybe not.
Nope,
Yes,
there
he
it
did,
is. Okay, so he will be able to knock out the active Volcanion EX, and then he's 4 prizes away, or 2 EX Pokemon away from winning the game, and that's kind of the goal of the Vespiquen deck, especially when you run the Vaporeon. You don't want to deal with the baby Volcanions. You kind of just want to keep Lysander and EXs off the bench and knocking them out.
So I think here, even though it is early on in the game, I think the outcome of this match will be determined in this turn and how Nick chooses to respond to that attack. His hand has not been great, but how he chooses to play it will determine whether or not he has a chance in the game, because the Vespiquen deck, once it gets into a certain position, it can very easily just steamroll and take 6 prizes in 3 turns. You don't even know what hit you.
How much? Do you know how much HP the Vaporeon has?
Vaporeon has 100 or 90. I'm pretty sure it's 90.
Okay. I was wondering if it had 8. If it had 80, the option of double steam up Lysander, depending on what his hand is. Definitely not, I guess, Sycamore. So he's probably looking to knock out the active this turn.
So we see 4 Fire Energy from Nick. Definitely not what he was hoping to see. He's already taking a knockout on the Vespiquen.
I think I saw a Lysander and a Fighting Fury belt as well. It's not horrible. He's going to be able to chain together a couple Vespiquen knockouts here in a row. And that's kind of what you want to do. You want to try and be ending your opponent while you're knocking out these Vespiquens to try and force them to whiff the Vespiquen return knockout.
And then
Nick, does he have a VS Secret in hand? I can't quite tell.
I don't think so. I would bet against it after him having to burn 3 early. He sets up the other baby Volcanion and putting one on the Volcanion EX with no energy. I think this is... Chris definitely wants the Lysander here if he has it.
Oh, absolutely. He has a lot of double colors energy in his hand.
I'm sorry.
Maybe not the best thing if he wants to be able to go deep for a Lysander play.
He also wants to be able to set up another Vespiquen. Once again, he only runs the 1 Force of Giant Plants. So if he attacks in with this Vespiquen, it gets knocked out and the force gets replaced, he's going to have a hard time reestablishing himself on the board. He does have an Ultra Ball. I assume he'll probably go for a Combi here. Just take the knockout on the active. And then go from there, trying to find the last 3 prizes. Well, it looked like he was maybe thinking about discarding a DCE there.
I don't know how much I like that. He has 2 special charge in his discard pile.
Maybe he doesn't. Do we know for sure? I thought I saw. I know he is 1 down. I don't know if he discarded the other one.
I don't think I saw another one in the quick look through the deck.
It could be prized. It's possible he's maybe thinking about passing the turn here and sacrificing.
I didn't draw a prize.
Nick, he did not take a prize from. I think he might have.
No, he's taken 2 knockouts now.
What was the first thing he killed?
He knocked out a. He Lysandered. What did he do? Didn't he Lysander something?
No, I don't think so because he.
Yeah, he Lysandered the Vespa Queen early, and then he just killed another Vespa Queen.
Yep, you're correct.
And then Chris had the Revitalizer, yeah. So we haven't seen a stadium from Nick yet. He probably plays one. It just depends on which one it is, how helpful it will be in the matchup.
Something like a Skyfield, I can't imagine would be too helpful in this situation.
I think Scorched Earth is probably the best stadium for this matchup. Super Rod from Chris.
That'll get him back,
I assume we'll see an N or Sycamore from him to end out the turn. Once again, just going for the knockout on the active and then trying to kill another Baby Volcanion, following it up in the end with an EX off the bench. The idea would have been for him to have a Lysander here. There's the second Vaporeon, so that kind of shuts down. If Nick ever wanted to like Lysander kill the Vaporeon, having both Vaporeon in play, it's no longer really an option.
Revenge knockout.
So Chris just opts to take the knockout here. He gets a escape rope off his prizes.
That could actually be big. He could actually use that next turn to force up an EX.
I'm not sure if he would be able to knock out a Hoopa here.
That's you're right on that.
I don't know if he has enough Pokemon in the discard pile.
He'll probably just look to knock out the next. I assume the Baby Volcanion will make its way up to knock out the Vespa Queen. He'll probably just look to knock that out, and then he'll be digging for the Lysander to finish off an EX on the bench. I'm not sure how many DCE Chris has left, though. One's down. He Ultra Balled one.
I think 1 is left in the deck because he special charged earlier.
That's right.
But that is, I think, it. So,
oh, that's the Faded Town, right?
He does. Faded Town and N. So, Chris is going to get 5?
3.
3?
I think, yeah.
3. And Nick is going to get 4 cards off of this N.
That's actually pretty rough for Chris. If he doesn't find a Sycamore here, he can struggle to establish a Vespa Queen and a Combi. So we'll have to see how what he draws.
Yeah, the Forest of Giant Plants getting bounced here is really relevant for Chris because he no longer has the ability to be able to set up a Vespiquen in 1 turn.
And then
so he draws Vespiquen, DCE, Flareon off of this hand.
Not very good.
So depending upon what he draws, he may just pass here to try and conserve his attacker. He draws a Jolteon. So
I assume he's going to Sky Return here then.
I agree with that.
And then if Nick has a Lysander to kill the Combi, that will more likely than not be game. I don't know if Nick has access to Lysander. He did ditch a bunch of VS Seekers earlier, unfortunately for him.
I think Nick plays 2 Lysander, and I only think he's played 1 so far.
Okay.
But yeah, Chris here is definitely not in the best position. Hopefully he can Sky Return the Shaman and put it down next turn using the setup ability to draw to 6. Get some, hopefully a VS Seeker. Oh, well, it looks like he opts to just kill the baby here. Now, depending on what he gets off of his prizes... Okay, so he gets a VS Seeker, but he still is not in a great position.
Yeah, he only does run the 1/4, so now his next turn turns into... Because now he has to be worried after this Vespiquen goes down, Nick can just Lysander one of the Shaman EX off the bench to end the game in his favor. So Chris has to be worried about that. I know he runs a Parallel City, so it's possible he could fill his bench and then ditch the 2 Shaman. So we'll have to see. I assume he'll be Sycamoring with that via Secret next turn. It's going to come down to what he draws and what he does with what he gets.
And then Volcanic Heat.
Nick here just attacks, knocks out the Volcanion. So one thing next turn is Nick cannot use Volcanic Heat again, but he can retreat into the bench Volcanion EX and take a knockout.
Yeah.
Chris here seemingly against the ropes. I don't really know what he can do here to really secure another turn after this one. I think he has to end here.
It's definitely tough for him. I think ending would put him in even a worse spot where he will never be able to come back. I think he has to Sycamore, hope for the Parallel City to get rid of his Shamans, hope to get a Combi, and hope that Nick can't just Lysander and knock out the Combi. And that he has to try and reestablish his board and kind of just hope Nick does not have the Lysander. If Nick has the Lysander, the game is most likely over. If he ends here, the chance of him drawing everything he needs is so low that Nick will almost for sure win, I feel like. Nick does have the VS Secret in hand, I think, if I'm not mistaken. I think I saw it.
Oh, so, well, I mean, if I were Nick, I would just show it here. I mean, maybe not.
There's the Sycamore from Chris.
So, I don't see much of anything that could be relevant here. He does have Combi Vesoquin in hand, but he Ultra Balls for a Combi. Now, he is basically going to have to pass Nick, and if Nick has Lysander, you'll see the end of game one.
Yeah.
Not quite sure what else.
Looks like he has a second Combi. I'm not sure.
Oh, Nick has the Lysander. That looks like it's going to be the game.
I'm not sure if Chris has Parallel. If he has the Parallel City in his hand, he can bench the other Combi and then ditch the Shamans.
I don't think he has the Parallel City in his hand.
Yeah, and if he doesn't...
he has Acrobike.
Yeah, if it's in the deck, it's probably worth digging for. I'm not sure what he'd be scared of discarding at this point.
Oh, he
got
just passes.
Lysander.
Alright, so that's the end of game one. So I don't see the Parallel City in Chris's deck.
It was maybe the last prize. I'm pretty sure he plays one. He maybe doesn't. I think that game all came back down to when he
really
chose to knock out the Baby Volcanion without a follow-up Vespa Queen. I think he would have been definitely better off Sky returning that turn, benching the Combi. Once again, hoping that Nick does not have Lysander to just Lysander kill the Combi. And if he doesn't, he can reestablish his board, maybe even N on that turn to hopefully knock out the active and set up another Vespa Queen. And then look for the last three prizes. But the road he took, his Vespa Queen was for sure getting knocked out, and then he really had no way to reestablish his field at that point.
So going into game two, I think Chris definitely this game is going to play a much safer game. I think he made a lot of decisions in the last game that were kind of risky. And in this one, I don't think he can afford to play quite so on edge. He does not have the greatest of starts. That Combi is not something, or Klefki is not something you want to start with because you cannot use its ability when it's in the active position. So Chris draws here. He does have access to Shaman.
Unfortunately, he does draw a special charge.
That is never something you want to have in your opening hand.
Yeah.
But Chris will be able to use Ultra Ball. He opts to discard the special charge here. I'm not sure what else is in his hand, but
I almost feel like I'd like to see him discard the DCE and then special charge it back.
Yeah,
it allows him to Shaman for one more. I'm not sure what the rest of his hand is, but I think that would definitely be the cleaner play. At this point, he's really just reducing his chances of drawing the outs he needs at this stage of the game. Also, Chris going first allows him to set up his board a lot cleaner. When you go second as the Vespa Queen, you usually have to bench more Shamans, clogging up your bench, not allowing you to bench as much Combis, making your follow-ups a lot weaker. But going first, you get to sculpt your field a little bit better.
Alright, so we see a pretty decent 4 cards off this setup. Chris is going to be able to set up a Vespiquen. He has Unknown on bench. He's obviously going to do that combo with Klefki where You discard Klefki, attach it to the unknown, you discard the unknown, basically getting 2 more Pokemon in your discard pile, fueling Vespiqun's attack. Chris going deep, using the Acro Bike, getting an unknown.
He gets another Acro Bike.
We are
He's looking for a supporter here, or Shaman. Shaman works to
No.
dig for more cards. He has Forest in play. It looks like he's going to be able to set up a Vespiquen with DCE. He'll set up again. He wants to find Eevee
Set it for 4.
and a supporter here to continue to cycle through his deck.
Now Nick here, once again, he started with the Volcanion EX. Not the ideal starter. He's definitely going to have another struggle getting it out of the active. Hopefully he'll be able to find a float stone. So Chris right now having a great turn 1. He is
Great up until the point he hasn't found a supporter yet. So his hand is actually, he's pretty much bricked at this point. He has no follow-up. Once again, if he had discarded the DCE
he would have had more cards.
and used the special dodge, he would have been 1 card deeper in his deck at this point, I believe. Which could be all he needs. So that might come back to bite him. You don't need to attach. Of course, going first, you don't need the DCE immediately. It's nice to have, but it's also a little bit nicer to actually draw a supporter and play it during the turn.
And the lack of an Eevee on Chris's turn 1 means that we are not going to see of a Porygon for at least 2 turns. So he will not be taking any EX knockouts here, unless I'm not sure how many Pokemon he has in his discard pile, but I definitely don't think it's enough to knock out the Volcanion without weakness.
Yeah, probably not. He could, if Nick promotes a baby Volcanion here, if he gets that into the active to knock out the Klefki, which I'm not even sure he would want to do. I think he would maybe like to wait a turn to set up a little bit better. But if Nick does do that, gets the baby Volcanion into the active, knocks out Chris's active, that's 2 more Pokemon in the discard pile. He might be able to get enough Pokemon to knock out a baby Volcanion without a Fighting Fury Belt. I don't think he would be able to with a Fighting Fury Belt. We see Nick scoundering it again, once again, the best starting Pokemon for the Volcanion deck, and he gets the 2 Volcanion EX again. Once again, I'm not a huge fan of this. I think saving an extra bench space open for either your second Shaman should you get into a bad situation, or to be able to put down more baby Volcanion, I think is a little bit better for this matchup.
Absolutely. And ooh, we see a Max Elixir here from Nick. We did not see any of those in the first game. He does whiff, unfortunately for him.
Yeah, most people run Max Elixir in the Volcanion deck. It varies. I think it varies from 2 to 4. I've seen 2, I've seen 4.
I have not seen a more heated argument
Acro Bike 2 would have been
when
an
talking
ugly
about
Acro Bike.
anything other than Max Elixirs and Volcanion.
I think it's definitely better, especially because the deck's so popular right now. It's really strong in the mirror match to get the extra energy in play.
And I had to like dump double
If
DCE.
it will put you so far ahead in the mirror match
attached the DCE
if
to
you
a
play the
Eevee.
Max Elixir that it almost becomes
I
an
was trying
auto win
to-
if they don't.
I don't know.
So I feel like with the
why I
popularity of
acrobated
Volcanion, you
twice
almost are
in
forced to play the
and
Max
then of
Elixir
course I hit the special
in the
charge
deck
off
right
of
now.
that.
Oh, yeah.
And my other special
Acro
charge was
Bikes
prize, so I was
gives
literally
2
down to
fire
1
energy.
DCE.
Oh, man.
Nick here, not
he
really
really
in any
Jirachi?
rush.
Yeah, well no, he Jirachi'd once after
He
that.
knows
Oh,
that
oh,
Chris
oh.
did not play a supporter last turn.
I'll
So
use a steam up.
And he's trying to avoid playing. He has the end in his hand. He's trying to avoid playing the end. He's going for the setup.
Yep.
He wants to draw Sycamore here.
ooh, 3 energies
And
and a
Nice.
Max
Oh.
Elixir. That is
Fail.
definitely not the
Most likely.
sequence of cards you would want to draw. Whiffs
another fail on the
Max
Max
Elixir.
Elixir as well.
I call him, man.
I wonder if Nick will play the end here. I almost
Garbage.
feel like he has to.
I would attach, and I don't think
That's
he
not
played the
me
end
too,
here.
'cause, like,
If I were Nick, I would
I don't wanna
attach to
go
my
overboard.
active
Yeah.
and
If I miss
pass.
him, I miss
You
him.
need like the
he-
versatility
Chris
of it though against
is
like
in a
Demon's
very
Ball
bad
and some of those
position.
Yeah,
drops.
yes.
I mean, they're about equal. Nick would have to sit here and attach to his active Volcanion 3 times to ever attack. He probably, attaches to the bench just in case the active one gets knocked out. He'll eventually be able to find a Float Stone or the Olympia or something. Debating about the end.
He looks at the discard pile, sees no supporters. Now, you have to think that if you end Chris here, he would probably draw into some sort of draw supporter.
Yeah, for sure. And if he is choosing to end here, I'm not sure how much I like the attachment.
So
On the
he does
Volcanion
choose
EX?
to end. I don't agree with this play from Nick. We'll see
Figured
how
go
it
from top deck
affects
something
the
and start to go off.
Chris's
Yeah.
hand.
Should have just looked.
Yeah, yeah.
But with how much more Chris has gone through his deck, he definitely has better odds than Nick of top decking a Sycamore or out to a Shaman. So then it would put Nick 1 turn further behind should he not end here. So I kind of like the end from Nick here. so he doesn't get too far behind.
Chris, I don't see a supporter. I see Via Seeker. Oh, he just, I think they passed. So, Chris here, still not in a very great position after that end.
A stupid card.
Yeah, it's not looking great. I'm not sure if that's a Sycamore there or not. On the bottom.
Ultra
Doesn't
Ball,
matter. You
that's
just see them like
Ultra
chain
Ball.
into each
On-
other.
on the
and
bottom?
discard
Yes.
quickly.
Yeah.
In his left hand, that's an Ultra Ball.
Oh, in his right hand. On the right, towards his right.
That is a poor game.
No, but to the left of the Vapor. Yeah.
That is a forest of giant plants. So he plays 2 forests.
Oh, he
of
does
giant
play
plants.
2 forests. Okay, that's actually probably definitely beneficial for this matchup than more beneficial than the Parallel City, because your prize trade is already so favorable. As long as you can keep it going with the Vespa Queens, you should usually win the matchup.
Forest of Giant Plants, such a interesting card in this meta game. When it first came out, I think it was very underutilized, and now people really understand the power of the card. It's such a good attacker like Vespa Queen.
Yeah.
Chris here, looking through his deck, thinks about getting another Shaman.
He most likely has to. If he doesn't have a supporter, he has to draw something and start putting some kind of pressure on Nick's board.
Now, Chris definitely, he opens himself up to 3EX knockout win from Nick here.
Did he win?
Yeah.
Not something you want to do when you're
I
playing
told you it's a
Vespa,
good matchup.
but the best.
Which is, it is most likely, is mostly unlikely that Nick would be able to chain 3 knockouts on Shamans back to back to back. It is definitely a possibility, though. It looks like it's going to be a setup for 2. That's not very many cards. He has no space for a 4th Shaman or like the Ultra Ball for an unknown, so he has to hit a supporter here if he wants to keep going with this turn.
DCE is the draw off Shaman.
That
So
sounds like a Sky Return to me.
We will be able to retreat the Klefki, which will open up a bench space because he can discard it. But Chris here really not getting what he needs to succeed. Nick, on the other hand,
I don't like this play. He's no supporter. How much damage is he doing?
I'm not sure.
I would have definitely preferred to have seen him Sky Return there. Especially because Nick's setup isn't great on his side either.
Definitely does not have enough Pokemon in the discard pile to knock out this Volcanion. I think he's going to do around 90, 100 damage. Yeah, he does 90 here.
If Nick just retreats this Volcanion, it's out of reach for Chris
I don't really
to
know
knock it
what
out.
Nick, or what Chris is thinking here.
If he had a Lysander, it would be probably a little bit different. But even if he does have a Lysander, if the Vespa Queen should get knocked out by a baby Volcanion, he doesn't have a 3rd Vespa Queen, and he has no supporter in his hand. So I definitely would have liked to see him Sky Return there over attacking with the Vespa Queen.
Oh, so we see a Floatstone.
And there's the Floatstone, so the Volcanion's getting out of there.
So we see Sycamore here.
So he's looking for Baby Volcanion Fire Energy. That's like the ideal 2 cards for him to get. I think I see Ultra Ball. Oh, it's Trainer's Mail. He has a Fire Energy for sure.
So he gets an Ultra Ball off his Trainer's Mail.
There
so
it is.
We'll be seeing a baby Volcanion attack this turn. Chris here, very poor sequencing of plays here, and I think
he definitely dug himself into a hole with that play. It definitely would have liked to have seen him Sky Return there for sure.
I agree. So here we see Nick Ultra Ball for the baby Volcanion, and now the game really starts for Nick because he's going to be able to power up all the Pokemon on his bench. And Chris effectively is a sitting duck right now. He has no supporter, and after this Vespa goes down to Power Heater, he will have no attacker.
Well, he has the 2nd Vespa.
Oh, he does
but
have the Vespa on his bench.
he did 90. He won't even be able to knock out the baby Volcanion, right? Oh, there's the Fighting Fury. He definitely won't be able to now. And this is what happens when he chose not to Sky Return so that he could use the setup the next turn. He wasn't under a ton of pressure. You're supposed to go behind 1 or 2 prizes in this matchup early, so I'm super surprised he chose to not Sky Return there.
Chris here, top deck's double colorless energy. This begs the question, do you Sky Return? Is it even worth it at this point? Your hand is so big that drawing a card for turn. He does decide to Sky Return here, but he's going to have to promote a Shaman and give Nick 2 prizes, or else he will literally have no response the next turn, and that is definitely not a position that you want to put yourself in.
No, I think at this point you actually have to risk sending him to Vespa Queen. You have the second forest in your hand. I think you have to hope on drawing a Revitalizer top deck or something. When you send this Shaman up, it's going to be 2 prizes from Nick. Nick just knocks out
You're putting yourself
the next
behind.
Vespa Queen. There's an escape rope.
That was a tough choice.
Maybe he's just burning it, or he's plans to Sycamore eventually anyways. Maybe he's trying to bait Chris into sending up the. Yeah, there's the Sycamore. So it would have been burned anyways. What's going to happen here is Nick is almost for sure going to get the knockout on the Shaman. Then he's going to knock out the Vespa Queen with the baby Volcanion, and then he'll follow it up with what he hopes to be a Lysander knockout to close out the game on the Shaman EX on the bench. So I would have liked to see Chris take the unfortunate risk of sacrificing the Vespa Queen in hopes of setting up another Vespa Queen next turn to knock out Nick's active.
Now we'll see here the draw from Chris. I don't know what he could really top deck in this situation. Eevee is definitely not something that can help at the moment. It is something he can play to draw more cards off of Shaman, but things right now looking pretty bad for Chris.
Yeah, he's going to have to draw pretty well. He doesn't have to draw that well. I think he definitely needs to find a way to take a knockout, whether it is Lysandering Shaman, Lysandering Baby Volcanion. I think the ideal thing would be to Lysander Shaman, kill and knock out Shaman here, set up another Vespa Queen, and then hope to chain Lysander from there on EX Pokemon. Set up for 3. It's got to be good. I think I see a Sycamore and an Ultra Ball, so he's going to be able to get a Combi, so he can start chaining Vespa Queens. I don't think he has too many Pokemon as his card power right now.
Now, as Chris starts to make the comeback here, we are reminded that time may be a factor. I'm not entirely sure, but if this goes to a game 3, they may go to time.
And I think Nick would be slightly favored in that just because the Volcanion deck draws prizes faster, and you could play your board around trying to deny deny Chris prizes. So I think it definitely goes into a prize race under time situation that Nick would be slightly favored. Not much, just a little bit.
Fighting Fury Belt's such a
a
demoralizing card because it makes Pokemon seem so untouchable with their HP numbers.
Yeah, for sure.
210 HP Volcanion on turn 2, and you only have 3 Pokemon in the discard pile. It's disheartening.
My good golly.
Chris here plays the N. Definitely not what you'd want to see here.
I'm not. I mean, it's like the second best supporter he could. I think the best supporter he could have drawn there was
really
definitely
bad
the
shape,
Lysander. But
I think the goal this turn for Chris is definitely to set up another Vespiquen or Combi on the bench, so that way he won't be totally stranded next turn.
I think he also has to actually try and find a way to knock out the active Volcanion. I don't know how many Pokemon are in his discard pile. Vespiquen's not quite the beast it used to be. It doesn't hit the big numbers as easily since Battle Compressor has left the standard format. But I think in this situation, you kind of have to try and reach and dig as deep as you can to try and get that damage and knock out this Volcanion.
So Nick here, he draws an energy and 2 cards I cannot see at the moment. Chris does not draw very
Chris's
well.
hand does not look good at all. He's definitely not knocking out this Volcanion. I assume this is going to be a retreat into Eevee and pass. You leave the Vespiquen active to hit. The Volcanion for 100 or so, it's not going to really do anything.
So the Sky Return here.
Well, Sky Return is definitely a better play.
Oh boy, if you're Chris right now, you're not very happy with your deck. These players, they drove very far. They played 6 rounds of Swiss, and
it has been rough, but I definitely think Chris kind of dug himself into this hole with the earlier
absolutely
choosing not to Sky Return. Sure, it would have only drawn him, I think, 2 cards on the setup next turn, but sometimes that's all you need. And when you have nothing, it's everything.
I think this format, more so than a lot of past formats, has a very heavy but I should say emphasis on sequencing your plays. And when you make the wrong sequencing of your play, things can go wrong very quickly. And I think we're seeing that here. Chris really between a rock and a hard place with this promotion.
So the Volcanion EX can't attack next turn. You see Nick go through 2 Max Elixir. So I actually don't mind sending up the Shaman here, as he would need triple steam up, and then retreating to the Baby Volcano to actually knock it out, and maybe just hope Nick can't get the knockout on the Shaman. I think that's probably his best bet.
So he does.
If Nick just has the Ranger here, it's going to be tough for sure, but I don't think he has it.
So Nick has energy retrieval in hand.
So that will
so
be.
He does have the triple steam up if he wants, and I definitely think that's what he should do here.
That's probably what he will end up doing, yeah, for sure.
I may be wrong. I'm not sure. I thought I saw. Oh, well, we do see the retreat here. He's counting his bench. Going back to what you said about clogging spaces, but
yeah. Once again, I still feel like the third Volcanion X is super unnecessary in this matchup.
So here we see the energy retrieval. We know Nick has another fire energy in his hand. We're going to see triple steam up here.
Yeah, I assume so.
Very powerful
triple
turn
steam
from
up.
Nick. And if you're Chris right now, you're not happy.
Power heater.
So here we see the power heater. Shaman EX gets knocked out. Nick will go down to 1 prize.
Yes.
And Chris here, you gotta wonder, what can you do?
Chris's whole game now comes down to ending Nick and hoping Nick does not draw a fire energy. Also, he needs to knock out this active Baby Volcanion. And that's pretty much all he can do. Kind of put himself in a tough spot, and now he's got to try and dig his way out of the hole. He actually dug himself.
Now,
he only has one.
Here.
Nick only has 1 prize left, so the management of DCE is kind of irrelevant. I would like to see him actually bench this Mewtwo, unless he's Ultra Balling it away. Make sure he also has to make sure he has enough Pokemon in his discard pile to knock out this Baby Volcanion. I would have liked to see him bench the Mew there. I'm not sure why he didn't bench the Mew. Maybe he's looking to just try and discard it through other means, this turn or next turn. But it is at this point clogging his deck.
I feel like benching the Mew, there's really no reason not to. It's just one less card to draw off his end.
Yeah, and he's already looking to set up the Vaporeon, so getting a ton of Pokemon in the discard pile is not really something he needs to worry about. He's drawing 6 off this end.
Nick does not look at his card. Chris here draws, gets an Ultra Ball, so even if he isn't able to get a Vaporeon here, he will be able to discard 2 Pokemon. So I think we're going to see a knockout on the Baby Volcanion here. The question is, what is that card that Nick just drew? If it's Fire Energy,
the game's over.
The game is over.
If it's a Via Secret, the game's probably over. If it's an Energy Retrieval, the game's probably over. If it's a Shaman? I don't know if he runs 2 Shaman. We haven't seen a second Shaman out of Nick yet.
I would assume that he does. Nick says that Chris has 16 Pokemon in his discard.
Okay.
So that means he will be doing 180 with Bee Revenge.
Takes the Shaman. Okay.
Ultra Balls for Shaman here.
Did we see a Vaporeon in Chris's deck, or oh, there we go. He's going back through.
Back to look.
No, it doesn't.
I did not see one. I think one is prized here.
And he did discard one earlier, correct?
So.
He did discard a Vaporeon earlier, correct?
Did, yes.
Okay.
So we're gonna see.
So he actually needs to dig to get enough Pokemon to start knocking out these big EXs the following turn after this. I don't think he'll set up here. He doesn't need to.
Well, yeah. Nick here, he has a fresh Volcanion EX with a Fighting Fury Belt, and I don't think there's any way he can knock it out unless he gets a perfect prize. And I think he does. So if this is not a Fire Energy, he top decks it.
There's the Fire Energy.
The game.
Did he? What did he get off the prize again?
He got a Vaporeon.
He got the Vaporeon. So if Nick had bricked on those 2 draws, Chris definitely would have been able to evolve to the Vaporeon, Lysander up that Volcanion, and maybe take the game back from there. But unfortunately,
my whole deck was pretty good to draw out of that end.
Doesn't happen.
I knew that.
And Nick is going to be
the
victor here, 2-0 over Chris.
Yeah, that was super bad.
As we finish this top 8 matchup, and I think we'll be back as soon as we can with top 4.
Yes.
We both drew really bad game 1.
Yeah, game
I
1
drew
was awesome.
exceptionally bad game 2.